whatsoever. Bill figured if he brought people here, advertised it, brought people here, he could make money. So, and the reason this was built on the east side of the park rather than the west side of the park is there had already been tourism development around Lake McDonald Lodge. The east side was undeveloped. Yeah. Sorry, I'm ad-libbing here, forgive me. The one thing to remember about all of this is that until 1895, this was traditional Blackfeet territory. It was actually part of the Blackfeet Reservation. It was sold, or there was an agreement in 1895 to sell it to the American government, which happened. It was open to exploration. Nobody found anything, and it just sat here until it was created as a national park in 1910. Second thing I want you to know is that Many was one of 9 chalet colonies that were built around the park by the Great Northern Railway. If you've been to Two Medicine, if you go up to Granite Park Chalet or you go to Sperry Chalet, those are legacies of the chalet colonies that were here. Also, the 2 chalets as you enter the area and just before you're going to cross Swift Current Falls, those are the legacy of the original chalet colony that was built here. Those were the 2 outliers. The rest of them were on Mount Alton. Just where you turn off to come in, if you look on the right-hand side of the road, that's where they were. Now, just FYI, if you're wondering where the rest of those chalets went, they were destroyed by a fire in 1936. It almost took down the hotel. Fortunately, because of you guys, the staff, the hotel was saved. Before the chalets, though, there was a tent camp here, actually just across the way over towards where the ranger station is now. And it operated until 1918. The idea of the tent camp was Louis Hill wanted to ensure that nobody else crowded him out. Therefore, he set up the tent camp while he was building the chalets. The chalets were completed in 1912 and opened. But for a period, up until 1918, there was actually the tent camp. You could also rent rooms in the chalets, and you could rent rooms right here in the hotel. After 1918, what happened is they abandoned the use of the chalets for guests, and it was used to staff accommodations until 1936. Third item I want you to think about, the hotel was built in 2 phases. The first phase, from the lobby all the way to the dining room and the kitchen. And that was built over the winter of 1913-14. The annex was added over the winter of 1916-17. The thing to remember is that everything was brought into this site by either truck or on a horse and wagon. Highway 89 was not used. They brought everything in from Browning. And the reason they didn't want to use Highway 89 is because that's where the tour buses and the horses and wagons would bring tourists. And they didn't want to chop up the road by having all these transport trucks going back and forth. So everything came out of Browning. The other thing to remember is that there were no cranes used to build this hotel. Every one of these lobby pillars was put up with a block and tackle. They had a Great Northern Railway bridge building team here to help with the construction of that. And the other thing you have to remember is that because it was only block and tackle, the majority of the lumber got humped up those stairs, all 4 floors, by the laborers. They took up every nail, every doorknob, every door, every sink, all of the plumbing fixtures, everything was taken up by hand. So it was a hell of a job that these guys were doing. Fourth thing is all of the wood, or just about all of the wood for this hotel was actually cut in this valley, despite it being a national park. The Great Northern Railway got permission from the park to start chopping. They outlined some areas where they could cut, and that was done here. They had a sawmill sit up on that spit of land just beyond where the boathouse is, where the boat crew lives. And that operated while they cut all the lumber into the correct sizes. You will notice in some of the rooms that some of the lumber is very rough, and that's a result of what they cut here. They may have brought in some of the planed wood, but I don't know how much. The interesting thing about the sawmill is it lasted for a decade, more than a decade after the hotel was built. And in 1925, Stephen Mather, the head of the National Park Service, got pissed off that it was still there, to the point that he brought his daughter here on her 18th birthday, and along with his daughter, he brought a bunch of dynamite. And he was determined that this sawmill should go, despite the railway having permission to have it there. He had workers plant dynamite there. He called his daughter and a bunch of friends out to stand on the balcony, and then they went, blew the damn thing up. Except it didn't blow it all up. Actually, much of the building survived. I've got pictures to prove that. However, the railway did get rid of the sawmill after all. It was taken up to build the Prince of Wales Hotel in 1927. Like I said, if you look at some of the rooms, you'll see the circular saw marks. This kind of a reminder of the sawmill. Number 5. Saddle horses played a huge part in the existence of this hotel during the early years. In fact, the Park Saddle Horse Company had one of the largest collections or number of horses of any national park in the United States. You've got to think, the only way to see the interior of the park back in those days was by saddle horse. There was no going to the Sun Road. You couldn't drive it. You could get this far, but if you wanted to get anywhere else, you had to go either on your own 2 feet or on a saddle horse. The idea that Louis Hill had is that you would ride between each one of the chalets to get around, and that was how you were supposed to see the park. Your luggage would be taken by either a wagon or a bus and brought to your location. So when you were riding through the park, you'd eventually get to Mini Glacier. Your luggage would be waiting in your room when you were ready. The Wranglers who actually led those tours were a colorful bunch of guys. A couple of them, Jack Brown and Blackie Dillon, operated out of here. These guys would dress up like cowboys, really extravagantly, bright colors, and they were also, outside of Deer Jammers, some of the best liars in the park. So they would tell tourists things like, well, every year we got to turn on the water for all of the streams, but before we do that, we got to go out in the lake and paint it blue. That's why it looks so beautiful blue. And they would feed this sort of crap to tourists, and tourists would take it. Or advice, like from the transportation desk or the information desk, is if it's too far to walk all around Swift Current Lake, only go halfway. Just FYI, this is number 6. The buses came later. Initially, Louis Hill did not want buses in this park. He wanted everyone to get around on either a saddle horse or on a tally-ho, which is a wagon with a bunch of seats in it. However, the problem was it was raining as hell and the roads were crap. What you have to remember is that until the mid-1950s, most roads in this park were not paved. They were gravel. So the horses and wagons simply couldn't get through. They weren't meeting schedule. And Louis Hill broke down and said, yeah, as much as I'd like people to take the time to be able to enjoy the scenery, we're going to put them through on a bus because they can make it. Now, the white motor company Model 706s that you're going to see pull up at the hotel here were bought in the mid-1930s. And the one thing to note about them is that one of the competitors for that to be considered rather than the Model 706 was Ford. It had a bus that it brought out. Unfortunately, it had a shit-lousy suspension. It rode rough as all heck when loaded with people, to the point that the Model 706 by the White Motor Company took over. The irony is that when the buses were going to be pulled from service in 1999, because of safety features, it was the Ford company that stepped up and put up the millions of dollars needed to rehab the buses and put them back on the road. So just a little bit of trivia for you. Number 7, the weather, particularly winter here, takes a hell of a toll on this hotel. You can't imagine it unless you've seen the photos. The snow will blow up to the 2nd or 3rd floor. It will cover the porte cochere out there easily. The problem with the snow is twofold. One is the weight. When it gets bad, I've got pictures of them actually shoveling snow off the roof of this hotel to prevent it from collapsing. The other thing is, it will get into the rooms, it will blow in through any crack, the wind is that fierce, and it will start rotting the wood. And it particularly rots the balconies, to the point that balconies started falling down, and they were shoring them up within a few years of construction, just because of the weather. And that would lead to, eventually, starting in 2001, a 16-year program to rehab this hotel. That included stripping off most of the exterior of the hotel, laying concrete foundations to put in steel poles to which they would attach steel balconies. So while they look like the originals, they're in fact braced by steel. just to prevent them from A, rotting. If they do rot, we can put the wood back, but we've got steel reinforcement underneath it. They spent some $42 million rehabbing this hotel. And it included a lot of things. One of them was straightening the hotel. The weight of the snow blowing on it was actually leaning this hotel toward the lake to the point that they were fearful it was going to collapse. If you've ever been down in what's called Stagger Alley, you can still see how the hotel is somewhat crooked. Has been for a long time. But the neat thing is they restored some of the original features of the hotel. One of those features was the ceiling in the dining room. There was a false ceiling in there, put in the mid-30s, lasted up until they started this rehab program. When they pulled it out, they found a lot of bat guano, but then they were able to expose that beautiful engineered ceiling that's in there right now. The other thing they put in, or restored, was the circular staircase behind me. The gift shop actually extended out to almost where the piano is. That was put in the 1950s. The guy who did that figured he could make more money from a gift shop than he could from stairs, which was the reason he covered them up. Amazingly, when they got rid of the gift shop, lifted the rug, they could see the outline of the original stairs, so they knew exactly where to put them. The Park Service found the blueprints, rebuilt the stairs, and put them back in again. It's a wonderful feature to have back in a hotel. It took 60 years to do it, but my God, it looks great. Now, number 8. Ian Tippett was the longest serving manager that I know of at this hotel. He came in 1960, lasted until about 1982. However, he was also one of the longest, possibly the second longest serving employee in the national park. He started in 1955 with the Great Northern Railway over at Lake McDonald and didn't end his service until 2014. It's a run of about 60 years. Tippett was a Goonie character. He was tall, he was thin, he was English from Devonshire, spoke with a very distinct accent that he never lost his entire life. And he had a clipped way of saying things and emphasizing things. So he would talk about, we've got to attack this aggressively. And this is magnificent, or as Brits would now say, this is brilliant, just brilliant, folks. A number of things. One is he really encouraged employees to take time and enjoy themselves while they were here. He demanded a shitload of them when they were here and on the job, but off work, he realized you guys needed to have fun. So he supported that. He also discovered something that was a real problem at this hotel for a long time, and that was the fact there was nothing to do in the evenings, especially when it rained or when the weather was bad. You just simply couldn't go out. So what Tippett did was initiate an entertainment program at the hotel. You've possibly heard of it, and one of the reasons this piano is here is because of the group I belong to, the Glacier Park Foundation. We realized the old Chickering that you've got had a broken soundboard, can't be used anymore. But we want the damn thing kept just because we love it. It's been around for 60 plus years. But we also wanted you guys, if you want to get involved in an entertainment program, to have a damn good piano to be able to use. So we bought that one and put it in here over the winter. Tippett, though, asked for even more. He was HR manager for the company at the time, and he was able to hire people out of music schools and whatnot. In fact, one of those former employees was here this morning, Jay. He was working with a housekeeping crew, but he was actually one of the performers on stage. During the summer, they would have hootenannies and whatnot, entertainment every night. It would go from hootenannies to classical music as well. Almost all the waiters and waitresses in the dining room were musicians of one sort or another and singers. They would stop during the evening and put on usually 2 different shows for the early setting and the evening setting. As well, for 26 years, or 25 years, they performed a Broadway show here every year. If Tippett had been around now, you would have seen Cats and whatnot. In my day, it was 110 Degrees in the Shade. It was the Music Man, Fiddler on the Roof. If there was a Broadway play that was popular, they got it and brought it in. And the work was all done voluntarily by the staff. Amazing effort on the part of the staff. But Tippett also hired people to be able to do that. So if he needed a baritone or an alto to play Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof, he would hire somebody for that and figure out where to put him in a position in the hotel later. That kind of came second. He picked out all of his orchestra that way, as well as the stage hands, the people who handled the lighting, the sound. the sets, everybody was hired for a purpose. It was an amazing legacy, as I say. I hope you guys are able to pick up on this and maybe do something with it. Number 9. This hotel has had its fair share of weird guests, and I can't possibly tell you about all of them, but I'll give you 3 just as examples. One of them are the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller. He brought his family here in the early 1920s, and he was pissed. He had rooms down the long hall there, and what really pissed him off was the fact that those rooms had Jack and Jill bathrooms. Yeah. Namely, 2 rooms shared a single bathroom. And if you forgot to open the door on the other side after you used the bathroom, then that poor sucker couldn't get in to use the bathroom. Well, Rockefeller demanded that the room rate be cut by $1 a room, just because he had to suffer through using, his family had to suffer through using Jack and Jill bathrooms. You gotta remember, the room rate was only like $3 or $4 a night. So he was asking like a 25% discount. Well, the manager, Omer Ellis, didn't give a damn who he was and said, no way am I gonna do this. Rockefeller wouldn't give up though, and eventually went to the hotel company manager and got his discount. But it just gives you an idea of the spirit of the manager at the time and some of the guests that you get. There was another guest in the 70s who had an aversion to the number 13. And, well, these were not the exact rooms, but it kind of came up. They offered him something like 157 initially. And he just said, I can't take this room. The clerk, why not? He says, I can't take it. So the next room they came up with would have been something like 247. And again, the guy said, I can't take this room. And the clerk said, you haven't even seen it. What's wrong with it? And he says, I can't take it. And they came up with a 3rd room. It was like something like 364. And it's the same thing. The guy, it was after that the guy finally explained his aversion to number 13 and why he wouldn't take the room. So the clerk, finally realizing what was going on, then found him a room that didn't add up to 13. The last example of weird people that come through here was the person who came with a pet alligator. It was about 3 feet long, and they had it leashed up. And they gave him a room in the annex. So he had an alligator in the annex. They put the alligator in the bathroom, and they would feed the alligator periodically a chicken, about once every couple of days. But you can imagine the reaction of the maids as they walked into the room to clean the bathroom, and you see an alligator there, right beside you as you're trying to clean the toilet or the sink. Also think of the bellman. How did he get the alligator there? What they did is they actually put him on a bunch of luggage and hauled him up. Just wrapped him in a towel so his legs couldn't be flailing. The other thing I'm trying to think of is, why the hell would anyone bring an alligator into a national park in this area? But hey, it happened. Finally, number 10, a reminder that this hotel is 110 years old this year. Only about 20,000 people have worked at this hotel. You guys are carrying on a legacy that's been going on for that long. Very few people have actually had this privilege. And, what I'm hoping you'll do is make Mr. Tippett proud. For those of us who knew him or worked with him, he was an incredible guy, and he instilled in us a pride that remains. It's amazing. You're going to have some people come back this summer in July who worked at the hotel, and they're coming here for a reunion. They'll only be here for a day, but if you get a chance, pick their brains. You'll get some damn good stories that are way better than I can offer now. So, just to give you an idea of how the hotel sticks, the guy that I mentioned who came in today, Jay, worked here in 1976, and he described it as the best summer of his life. I want you to have the best summer too. Thank you.